Hello, I'm Duncan Welder with Risk, and welcome to our fourth installment of xAPI in Action and our first international interview. xAPI in Action is a video, interview, and blog series highlighting xAPI-enabled projects and processes underway by forward-thinking people in the L&D space. Today's interview is with Julian Davis. Julian is the founder and creator of Remote Reviewer. It's a platform, and also manages xAPI.com.au as a hub for promoting xAPI both in Australia and internationally. Julian brings a ton of experience with him as a learning solutions architect, a presenter, a facilitator, an author. If that's not enough hats to wear, he's an associate fellow of the Australian Institute for Training and Development and a fellow at the Institute for Learning and Performance in Asia Pacific region. So Julian and I are also in the most inconvenient time zone difference, so I feel really fortunate to have him with us today. So with that, live from Brisbane, let's bring Julian on.
G'day, Duncan. How you going?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No worries. Great
I,
to see you again.
I hope I served some justice in my short introduction, but I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about who you are and what I neglected or got incorrect there in my intro.
No, you've done quite well. I have been in web technologies now for around about 25 years. I discovered it by accident. My brother said, check out this internet thing in 1996, 97, and my curiosity got the better of me. And from there, I just took it on to continue web development. Wanted to start teaching, fell into adult learning,
Mm-hmm.
and then saw a gap where I could bring my web skills and teaching skills together. So I've been doing that for the last 10 or 15 years, which is really rewarding, really rewarding.
No, that's fantastic. And, at a similar route, I started out doing, say, online training development. And say online, I'll put the finger quotes in the air because at that time it was mostly running across local area network kind of things, and then expanded to the wide area network, and then the intranet, and then eventually, really getting into the website of the world. Um, Before we get into remote reviewer specifically and xAPI online.au, we've been operating in some very similar circles, overlapping circles for a number of years. What got you interested in xAPI and how'd you get started down this route?
I fell into it. I was working for a training organization that was doing a lot of distance tutoring and distance education, and we needed to know more about what our students were doing. So I was working with my developer to come up with a solution of how we can identify what our students were doing. So we're looking at proprietary analytics, and we were also using Moodle as our LMS, so we will be able to pull
Mm-hmm.
some data out of that. And during that process, I stumbled upon this thing called Tin Can API. The icon didn't grab me at all. I thought it was quite tacky with the way that they had the two tin cans. So, but I did a little bit more research into it, and my eyes just went, "Wow, this thing is a game changer!" And I could see that in the very, very early stages that it was a game changer. So I've been doing that now for about 8 years, and um, really like pushing and thinking outside the box of what xAPI can do. I know it's really designed for learning experiences, but that's not what it can do. So much more, so much more. I think it's still in its infancy, even though it's just become a standard. I do believe it's still in its infancy. It's still growing up.
No, I think that's completely right. And we're just now reaching I'm going to say the point of maturity where we could really start looking at what are the different classifications of uh, data and insight we can gather with xAPI, right? Because
Yeah.
I can gather data for evaluating the effectiveness of my training program. I can gather data for evaluating a student's performance or employee's performance, whatever the case is there. It's so often in the past, we just didn't have that level of nuance. It's like, okay, I know that people completed something. I knew how long they were there. I knew if they happened to pass a test. But to be able to step back and say, oh, if I could know everything? What are the questions that I need to answer? And then from there, backing up to what are the data points that I want to
Yeah,
try to capture to help answer that question.
that's it. I think one of our biggest eye openers was when we discovered that where students were telling us that they're available for tutoring on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, where the data actually told us something completely different. So we were able to really pinpoint the training for them on their particular days, which was really, really, really cool. And the other one was we started getting real time responses from questions. So we were then able to identify whether those questions, so if we were starting to see a pattern, which you couldn't really see if we were using SCORM or something, if you started using a pattern of why is everyone getting this question wrong? And then we
Mm-hmm.
can revisit that question, talk to the SME and find out, well, it's been worded quite badly. So we weren't able to see that vision before. So that's really, really cool. That was a real game changer for us.
Yeah, I appreciate that kind of instant and continuous feedback loop, I guess, is the
Yeah,
is the piece there, because you could do, say, item analysis on a question bank. You say over time I might be able to determine that most people miss this question. They miss this question because they answer D, whatever the situation is. But that's a very long-tailed wait to get to that piece of information, and by that time, someone has left. They may be operating under incorrect information now. So to be able to see that much shorter cycle, one of the fascinating things that I've you know talked about with a number of people, it's like real-time report cards where you say, I do
yeah,
something and I get to know immediately after what I need to correct, because that's the way that we shape human behavior, right? And
it is.
I think it's
You're
it's
right.
super important.
Sure is.
So, Remote Reviewer is a platform that really caught my eye and speaks to me as someone that grew up in I want to say the high consequence learning space, mostly petrochemicals and power
Mm-hmm.
generation and manufacturing, but all places where you have a very high concern for safety, where there's a required focus on environmental stewardship, because if something goes wrong, there's potentially a huge impact. That ties right into being a valued partner with the community, whether that's citizens around, that's local municipalities, that's a state, that's a federal kind of thing, right? It's all high visibility. In addition to making sure that whatever we're doing is providing the quality output that we want. But of course, I don't want to bias or pigeonhole the solution. I'd love you to give us a rundown of Remote Reviewer. What it is, what was the inspiration behind it.
So, Remote Reviewer was probably born about 3.5 years ago, where I was working with a colleague who was doing a lot of overseas travel to assess people coming over to Australia for visas. And we were just talking, and at that particular point, or a little bit before, I was starting to discover the video profile in xAPI. So, out on my motorbike doing a long ride, and it occurred to me that I could possibly bring the two together. So that's conceptually how it was born. And as it continued to grow in basically using video to allow assessment or review or inspection of anything, the applications of what it could do started to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. With the core being xAPI. So this is just, for want of a better term, an activity provider that is using xAPI with a task checklist that you can assign to someone to complete via video. And this is where the term remote reviewer comes in, because a remote reviewer, being anyone globally, can be assigned that task to then be able to view and assess the particular tasks against that particular video. When they capture that, that is all stored in xAPI. So it's interoperable. And this is where there's no proprietary involved. It's all interoperable with xAPI, which makes it very, very scalable, very scalable.
Well, and I don't think a lot of people recognize still that part of the XAPI spec is I have to be able to store say, a resource. So a video or a written answer or a picture that I take of something
Yeah.
as part of an xAPI statement. There are a couple different mechanisms for doing that, but the fact that I can say part of this requirement is that you upload a video or that you upload an image, and that that's going to be stored in that learning record store so that it, like you said, is portable between different learning record stores. But then also, as I move from one place to another, I can go back and access that evidence of
That's right. Yeah.
performance, right? Um, I was going to ask about the scope of industries. I mentioned that coming in that I think of this making so much sense from a standpoint of that heavy industrial kind of space.
Yeah.
But my wife works in the hotel and hospitality industry, and one of the things that I've seen for years is it's 10 a.m. This is when this needs to be done. So everybody just takes a picture with their cell phone and sends that picture to their area manager, district manager, whatever the case is, to say that this is done. It's like there really should be a better, more structured
Yeah.
way to do this, right? we
Yeah.
we should be capturing some data here as to what is happening, and those opportunities are there. So where do you see use or even interest at this point?
So in the well, in Australia we call it the technical colleges of adult learning, and my son's just completed a trade as a cabinet maker. He was a great use case for me because I created a task for him and just said, "Can you go and video yourself sanding and showing me correct sanding techniques?" And he did. He sent the video back, and it all worked. So he's in his early 20s. So I know that generation is going to work of how to use it because he was able to pick it up quite easily. And it's actually one of my use cases that I'm writing as well on xapi.com.au is I don't mention his name, of course, but I do use him as a use case. It can be used in remote, so mining, for example, if you needed to do a performance review or an assessment of someone out in a remote workspace, they can
Sure.
do the task and then submit it. Then someone else at head office can review it. As a motorcycle instructor in my spare time, I can use it for actually recording people doing slow riding skills or cornering or braking skills and be able to assess them on that way as well. So there's quite a range of applications that it can be used for.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And those things that very often to have an instructor or an assessor there beside you, you're in potentially a loud environment, or an
Yes.
environment where it's very difficult to have someone else there. There's safety potential things, so the idea, like I said, there on the on the motorcycle ride, being able to make a u-turn inside a lane, uh,
Yeah.
is a skill. And I don't know how Australia is. It's one of the only skills in the US that you could fail and still get your license, because they say it's not really critical, right? You could always walk a bike around, but you know then you sit outside, you watch people failing to make a u-turn on their bike, and you think, wow, they really should have pushed that skill a little bit more.
Yeah.
But those are things that just
You will fail your test here.
it just seems like such a useful application there. We can do this without having to be all together in a parking lot or standing in a lane of pumps underneath some kind of process unit in a
Yeah.
refinery, right? Where it's better not to have a group of people there. So the platform is web based and is writing
Yes.
back to an LRS or multiple LRS? How is that kind of structural piece?
So it does store some data. It's not a lot. It's to basically manage the actual task itself. But all data is written back to an LRS. So when you create a task, you select an LRS, which means you can have as many LRSs as you want. So if you were to consider a large organization, that may have different LRSs in each state, but the head office has a singular LRS. You could set those LRSs up, let's call them satellite LRSs for want of a better term, to forward completed statements and initialization statements. The LRSs, satellite ones, will collect all the niche data and everything that's associated with that. So suddenly you've gone from just having a single point to a multiple point through different LRSs. And because they all have to conform to the spec, they're all just going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And using the video profile as well within Remote Reviewer, when reporting tools come online in the future, it'll just plug straight in to be able to start reporting on the video profile. So it's quite, like I say, it's quite flexible in that scenario.
No, and that's something that I appreciate. I'm going to steal the language from the ADL's total learning architecture. They talk about, a learning ecosystem is going to have smaller transactional learning record stores, and there are critical elements that may need to go to an authoritative LRS that can document someone's competency. There may be a whole subset of statements that need to go to an anonymized LRS for evaluating the effectiveness of that tool or that training activity, that learning activity. So the ability to move those things around, and I think that probably answers one of my next questions was, where does the value of xAPI come in? And it's really being able to move those different elements around. You're using the video profile. Are there other
Yes.
profiles that you're using for structuring data?
Not
Or
yet. Predominantly that we are probably going to be working with Jason Haag on a
Mhm.
performance review, performance assessment profile, and we'll look at building that in. We both believe that it can work quite well within Remote Reviewer to actually have a dedicated profile that will incorporate the video profile as well as incorporating a performance assessment profile as well. So that's one of our future plans of where we want to go with it.
Yep, and I can't really think of anybody better to to work on that project than Jason. The huge amount of
Yeah.
experience, very specifically in profiles, and a lot of times technical kind of
Yes.
profiles. I really think that helps specifically the fact that we're looking at not only adhering to the specification, but defining specific profiles from an interoperability standpoint, that really helps reflect the maturity, essentially, as we,
Yeah.
transition from being that new specification that has hit the market to, the IEEE standard that xAPI has become today. I don't want to neglect xapi.com.au. How do you see that project supporting the industry, and what value does it bring to your users?
So I got xapi.com.au 3 or 4 years ago now, and the whole idea of it is to share resources. So by writing articles, writing blogs, very much circulated around xAPI and what it can do. And it's also a launching pad for myself and a little bit of remote reviewer as well. But I'm all for, and I've always been for sharing resources. I think that that's the best way that everybody learns. I've learned off so many people globally on different parts of technology, and in particular xAPI. So when the opportunity came up to acquire it, I thought it was the best way for me to be able to share some of my resources and my knowledge throughout the community to help people understand xAPI, because I still think that there is a little bit of, I don't know if fear is the right word, but it's change and a little bit of what's it going to do for me? And I've already got my digital learning ecosystem in place. I don't need anything else. So there's a little lack of understanding of how you can literally just plug it straight in, for want of a better term. You can plug it into your ecosystem and away you go.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but I don't know that we as L&D folks have been particularly good at thinking about data and using data to inform decisions, being able to to communicate that. So one of the things that I have been impressed with the xAPI community, really, again, since those early tin can days, was it was always, let me show you how to do this. This is what we're
Yeah,
doing. Where could this fit for you? Right. I mean, there's just a huge amount of sharing, even in between companies that are at least on the border of being competitive with one another. It's not
yeah.
it's there's not a hard wall there.
No, and I said at the beginning, thinking outside the box. It's not just a matter of we have the data there, that's wonderful. Now we're going to report on it. Well, what else do you want to do with it? A scenario came up when I was working for another company. I won't say who they are, but it's to do with the Australian Defence Force. Was that you maintain your own software? When you put a patch out for that software, how do you know if somebody's actually completed the training for that? Well, your software can query a learning record store. You know what the object's going to be. You know the verb that you're looking for, and if they've not completed that, you can direct them to the training. And once they've completed the training, which also communicates with the LRS, you'll then be able to then go, oh, you've completed the training, unlocks that part of software, and away you go. So that's another way in which it can actually be used as well.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a conversation from, oh gosh, years ago with Sean Putman, who was talking about putting xAPI not just in things like help desk, help support systems, which clearly makes sense, right? If people are going over and over to, oh, how to create pivot tables or whatever, whatever application that you're using, then maybe there's an opportunity for more training there, better explanation, or better user interface to help guide uh, someone through that activity. But even inside, you know, whatever computer application it is, if someone performs the same behavior over and over, and we can identify that and say, what, if everybody that performs the same behavior is struggling with this, and this is the time to intervene before they're frustrated while they're still cognitively involved, and go through and say, here, it looks like you may need help with this. Just like having that dashboard where, as you as a motorcycle instructor and a parent, I'm not a motorcycle instructor, but having taught kids to drive, it's like, wow, it would sure be nice if you just got a printout at the end of the ride to say, well, you were on the brakes a little hard here, and this was unnecessary acceleration, or this looks like a lane change that you had without using a turn indicator. Those things, again, if you can get those in real time, become so valuable. um,
Open my mind to the Internet of Things on motorcycles now.
Oh, yep. Accelerometers, how far over you're leaning. Yeah, there's just a ton of information we could capture there. And I love the idea of using Internet of Things devices. I think we've talked before, seen the
Yeah,
video that we have where I can finish a training module and it will turn on a switch that's attached to a coffee pot. It's like, that's
it's so
just an
cool.
API call, right? So if I can make an xAPI message that, will go in and say, hey, I meet this condition, then let's fire off an API call to my, little smart switch and make it happen. Um, so I also think about the fact that we could do it with, cars at this point, right? And
Well, you
say
could.
cars that have APIs that you can write to as
You
well.
could.
So it may be it may be a bigger animal than we want to get into there. Um,
But it does demonstrate. I mean, we talk about these things that are a little bit fantasy, but they're not really fantasy. But at the same time, it demonstrates just how interoperable and flexible the standard is, without going into the days. And it wasn't that long ago where we were all dealing with proprietary and, oh, I need this system to talk to it. No, they can't talk to each other. And now we have xAPI that sits at the heart of any type of ecosystem, with so many activity providers providing the information. It really does. It just opens up so much, so much.
that's right, and that's one of the things that drove us really in looking at. We have a tool X action that will take xAPI statements and we'll call third party APIs. It's like, even if you don't speak xAPI, we can still reach out and touch it because that technology exists. Circling back to the xapi.com.au, it brings me to the question about adoption. And, you know, sometimes I am guilty of not being able to see the forest for the trees because I'm immersed in xAPI stuff all the time. But where do you see adoption going in general, and very specifically in Australia?
I think it's slow. I think it's a slow adoption. I think there is potential lack of awareness. When it first really hit the stage, everybody wanted to know about xAPI, and then interest dropped off. I talk to a lot of people in the community, and particularly the e-learning and digital learning community, and we talk about xAPI. Oh, yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it really does. So I think that adoption here is quite slow, and I think we need some key players to adopt it and demonstrate how it can actually be used. So the likes of Defence Force, which is where a lot of technology comes out of and a lot of proven things come out of. So I think if the ADF was to adopt it, then I think that you would probably start to see it flow into commercial a little bit more. I think that the higher educational places and schools and universities, they're very slow to adopt it as well. And I think it's also potentially the fear of change is, well, we've always done it this way and we've got everything in place and we don't need to change it.
That's right. I think that's where, when you come in with data and say we can make valuable changes, or we've been doing it this way, but this really doesn't make the impact that we think. I'm sure from a practitioner standpoint, folks like us in the L&D world, there's probably some fear or trepidation there where you say, wait, I've been doing it this way all this time. And if someone comes in and says, "Oh no, I can document that doesn't work or that's not effective," that's bad for me. But the reality of it is that's really good for you.
Yeah,
And now, when you go to a stakeholder and say, "This is the solution we need to put in place," and say, "Well, why don't we just do this?" and say, "No, because I can show you with data and evidence that this is the more effective and efficient way of making this happen." I appreciate you sharing so much. I know that we're running tight on time. Is there anything else new and exciting on the horizon you want to share?
I am coming over to DevLearn. So I have never been to DevLearn before. So I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person. This is where we can now see how tall people are because generally you don't know when you're virtually. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to taking Remote Reviewer to the next level and seeing and working with Jason about how we can get these the performance assessments in place. There's so much happening. I'm really looking forward towards the end of the year, particularly coming over and meeting the likes of yourself and Jason and Megan and all the other xAPI gurus that hang out at DevLearn. I'm really looking forward to it.
It's one of my favorite shows every year, if not my favorite show. I really really enjoy it. Um, there is a great wealth of people there that are passionate and tech savvy and interested in moving the industry forward. So that will be great. Plus, we normally schedule a great night for Isakaya kind of grilled meats on sticks, and we'll make sure that we get that taken
Oh,
care of this year. All right.
that's
Thank you
fantastic.
again, Julia, for taking the time and scheduling to meet today. I look forward to catching up with you at DevLearn in Vegas. That's November. Please stop by and say hello. As always, if you have any questions in the meantime or any thoughts that you want to bounce off, never hesitate to reach out. I look forward to your feedback and keep your eyes open for the next installment of xAPI in action.
Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you.